You're listening to the BTown Breakdown, where we talk about life, art, local news, and all that jazz with your host, Alia Sinclair. Tune in for a new show every Friday at 106.5 KQWZ LPFM, South King County.
Hello, and welcome to this week's show of the BTown Breakdown, where we talk about art, life, local news, and all that jazz. I'm your host, Alia Sinclair, and today we're going to kick off with a segment I call Food for Thought. Handling rejection is difficult in any area of life. When it comes to art, it's especially tricky. Art is a particularly unique and intimate expression of the individual. Separating the intimate act of creation from the reactions people may have to it is difficult, though very necessary. If a rejection is particularly harsh or comes to an artist at an especially vulnerable time, it can have the tragic effect of causing an artist to have serious doubts about their own talents and worth. Worse still, it can cause some artists to stop creating altogether. So, if you're an artist, how do you go about boldly creating and expressing yourself when rejection is sure to be a part of the process? There are a couple things to consider here. The first is understanding that you are not your art. You are intimately linked with your art, yes, it is an expression of your innermost being, but it is not you. You are an entity that exists outside of your art, and as such, can remain unaffected by the judgments others have about your creations. Your audience is not the final authority on the quality of your art. They can express whether your work inspired, amused, moved, or entertained them, but their subjective opinions have no ultimate meaning when it comes to the value of your work. Ultimately, whether or not you allow their words to take up real estate in your mind and plant seeds of doubt there is up to you. It's a choice about where you choose to put your mental energy, not a foregone conclusion. As an artist, it is important to acknowledge to yourself that there are some people who simply will not understand or even like your work. What they perceive as good or bad should not cast a shadow on what you know to be the truth in your art. If you find yourself starting to cave to the opinions of others and doubting the quality of your work, remind yourself why you created the work in the first place. Do you feel you accurately and authentically capture the elements of truth you are aiming to convey in the work? If so, then your piece is a success, no matter how others may feel about it. It's human and very understandable to take rejection personally, but it's worth it to step back and readjust your perspective. Continue on with the understanding that you are standing and speaking in your truth, that you are not for everyone, and that's okay. And regardless of who or what enjoys what you make, you don't need the permission or applause of any outside force to sanction the work you do. It's enough on its own. It's enough to simply be. It's enough that you were brave enough to create it in the first place. So be, stand boldly in your creativity, and let your art be its own reward.
You're listening to the BTown Breakdown, where we talk about life, art, local news, and all that jazz with your host, Alia Sinclair, at 106.5 KQWZ LPFM, South King County.
Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Alia Sinclair, and you're listening to the BTown Breakdown, where we talk about life, art, local news, and all that jazz. Today I'm here with local artist Naomi Benson. Hello, and thanks for being here.
Hey, how's it going?
It is going. Doing great today in Burien. So I'd love to start with a little TLDR of you as an artist, a little background on your work and how it relates to the community.
I'm all over the place with my art, I would say, but lately I've been really focusing on trying to upcycle different materials.
Oh, yeah.
Because I have a cleaning business in my day job, and I notice that there's a lot of waste that just goes into landfills, and we don't have any answer for that.
Yeah.
Like shipping our waste overseas isn't really
right.
efficient, and not that I'm like solving that or anything, but I'm trying to like ease
giving
my
it a
own,
new life.
Yeah, and ease my own anxiety about it by doing something that feels productive, I guess. And so lately I've been really focusing on incorporating different materials that aren't going to break down into my paintings and kind of theming that around ocean and basically waste in the ocean, because I was really impacted by going down to the Duwamish River and seeing all the impact of the industrialized waste down there.
Yeah.
It really like made me sad.
Yeah.
And so I thought, I need to make this themed around the ocean too, or just water in general, because that's where we're at in the Pacific Northwest in Seattle with the Puget Sound and everything. And the Duwamish River affects the major waterways around here. So
definitely that kind of dovetails into your latest collection. That incorporates those themes, doesn't it? The collection To the Sea, I believe it's called. Yeah.
Yes. So I would say my biggest. Sorry.
You're fine. You can take a second to collect your thoughts.
I just don't want to repeat myself a bunch. I would say that really I like to focus on channeling when I do my art. So that's why it can kind of be all over the place.
Yeah.
But I'm inspired by many different things. But with this one, I really tried to focus on making it themed towards the ocean and like oil spills and things like that. But more subtly, like not where it's like right in your face, where you're like, oh my God, the world's ending.
Right. Leaving a little hope there.
Yeah, trying.
Yeah, so let's take a step back again to you as an artist. Where did you kind of begin your art practice? I know for a lot of creatives, when you ask that question, it's kind of like, well, it was always there. It's always been a part of me, But at what point did you start expressing it and finding your own voice as an artist?
Around the time that I turned 30, so like 7 years ago, I was just very overwhelmed by perfectionism because my job was really focused around that with cleaning and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm not a perfectionist. And so I felt a need for therapy. And so I was like, I need to just embrace creativity because I've always felt creative. And so I thought I'll just start by drawing every day and just picking things that I liked. And then from there, it evolved into really getting to know myself and feeling who I really was, you know what I mean? And not just like what I wanted to be.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah. You had talked in your artist bio about initially approaching your creative work as play and as a healing process.
Totally.
And is that kind of the start of that process, you jumping into that,
Yes.
releasing yourself from perfectionism and just creating freely?
Totally.
Yeah.
And when I started to like embrace abstraction was really when I felt like the most catharsis and like just like the most in touch with my art and myself.
Yeah.
Because I didn't feel like I was judging myself.
Yes.
Or like needing to tweak something just right, you know?
Yeah.
It felt like it was just flowing. And that's where I felt the magic, and it felt like, oh, this is what I'm meant to do.
Yeah.
And felt really therapeutic.
There is, I've said it on the show a few times now, people are going to be tired of me saying it, but I tend to think of abstract art as the visual representation of something like poetry, where poetry is sort of fragmented. It's sort of an allusion to a state of being instead of pointing it out. I mean, some poetry does point it out, but in general, it's more of a hint at a state of being as opposed to like, this is the thing. And I think abstract art does the same sort of thing. Have you found that's true? Like, oh, this is a feeling and I want to express this feeling as opposed to painting a bowl of fruit as realistically as possible.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think sometimes there's things as artists that we're not aware of, especially when we're doing channeling type work.
Yeah.
That we're like, I'll not be aware of certain emotions that I'm putting on the canvas until later.
You're like, where did that come from?
Yeah. Or somebody will tell me like, oh, that made me anxious or whatever. And I'm like, oh, well, that's where I was at when I made that. That makes sense. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and I know that abstract art is often critiqued for its lack of what some might call technical precision. Because some people look at it and be like, oh, you know, the famous, I could do that, my kid could do that, my dog could do that. Do you have any response to those critiques? We're kind of talking about it now, about what we feel that abstract art fills.
Right.
But do you have any other answer to that, to someone who's like, abstract art, why?
I think that's why I love it so much.
Yeah.
Is because it's not as pretentious. Like it can be, but I would say like art shouldn't have rules. And when people, like I saw a comment on the internet the other day, this woman was doing abstract expressionism and somebody said, I don't want this in the same category as Dolly or like
Wow.
a talented artist.
Yeah.
And that offended me
Yeah.
because I genuinely believe everyone's an artist.
I agree.
And everyone can take that out of them.
Yeah.
That expectation of like needing to be a certain way and just do it.
Yeah.
It's all about that movement and the action out of your head,
Yeah, I think that mentality stops a lot of people who would create otherwise. Is the idea of like, well, I don't know how, or I didn't go to school, or it'll look dumb, or I've all of these mental barriers they put in front of them when it's like when I was a kid, I was about 5 years old, and I was getting really frustrated because I was trying to draw something, and my mom said, "There's no wrong way to do art." And I remembered that all of my life because every time I go to express, and I'm like, well, that's not quite right. So there's no wrong way to do it. So there is no rule to break necessarily, There are technical rules that you can learn, but the world's not going to end if you don't follow them, if you don't go on the path of the classical painter or what have you. And it's true, you can disappoint yourself with what you wanted to convey that you didn't. But I think then it's the sort of flexibility of, well, what is this trying to tell me? Like you were saying of, I didn't know that was in there.
Right.
And now it's on the paper, and oh, well, that's better than whatever I was trying to make, right?
Totally.
So yeah, I love it. I would love to ask, this is kind of a silly question, but for my own curiosity, the name of your art business, Gnom Grown Art. I love that. There's a sort of earthy quality to a lot of your work, but it struck me in particular because my wife is a horticulturist and she refers to herself as a professional garden gnome.
Oh, I love that.
I love seeing it in another professional creative capacity. So if you talk a little bit about the name.
Well, I actually got the nickname Gnome from my family growing up because I it kind of sounds like Naomi and I couldn't really pronounce Naomi very well. So then it just got Gnome or Nomi, my family, and then my friends started calling me that. And then I've always loved plants and botany and just studying everything in the biology realm.
Yeah.
So I thought, it kind of works.
It does. It's very cute. And like I said, it is reflective of your art as well. Like some of the earthy qualities, like you see some mushroom or the color palettes you use are reminiscent of the earth. And so
Thank you.
I think it works on a variety of levels. So thank you for that. I was wondering about it. I'm like, I love that Gnome Grown Art. It's so good. We talked a little bit about your current collection to the sea, and you've integrated elements that we would commonly think of as trash. And how is that process when you see a piece of something that's been discarded? You're like, do you plan the piece around that piece of quote unquote trash, or does it kind of come about organically? What's your process there?
So it's kind of funny. My whole life I've actually been a little bit of a hoarder, and I've gotten better over the years about like not letting it take over my life. But when I had my art studio over the last year and a half, I had like an area dedicated just for trash that I found interesting.
Yeah.
And when I'd be working, I would see like, oh, I think I need something there that looks just like texture or anything different. And trash is really good for texture, like creating it in different ways.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it would be planned around it. Like I did a piece that was with Insulin Bags, and that was planned around that because they were so interesting and metallic. Yeah. And so I thought, I have to use this. But there's other ones that I just, after I'd kind of painted the piece, I thought, oh, this would be interesting here, and I'll add it in or whatever. So it's kind of all over.
I like you said insulin bags.
Yeah.
I'm a diabetic, and I have an insulin pen sitting right here. And something that drives me crazy that I can't really do much about is how much medical waste is involved in being a diabetic. Because I have like these continual glucose monitors, and they come in plastic applicators, and then there's the insulin pens that run out, and I'm throwing them away of 7 to 10 needles every day that come in little plastic caps that didn't get thrown away. It's like all of this plastic and all of this waste, but you're inspiring me. I can make art.
Do you get the blue bags? They're like metallic blue.
I don't. I'm not sure what those come in?
They would, at least one of my clients would get her insulin shipped with like ice packs.
Oh,
inside
yes.
of the
Yeah, the
metallic
pharmacy
bag.
does. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the ones that I use. They're really fun. But
Yeah, but that would be because it could also, I don't know. There's a lot to say about that because,
Exactly.
like, with there's chronic illness, and then there's, I don't know, you get real meta with it, and being like diabetes and the sweetness of life, and
Right?
despite this, that, or the other thing, and try to use some of that because it kills me. The amount of plastic that is just involved in staying alive and taking my medicine is unfortunate.
Totally.
But I love that, so thank you for inspiring me. Where is your To the Sea collection now? Where can it be viewed?
It's so I have some of it up at Normandy Park City Hall, and then I have some pieces at Edward Jones in Westlake. So it's kind of split up, but it's all online if you wanted to see it on my website, gnomgrownart.com. But I would like to have a show where I have all of it up in one place.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
that would be really nice.
Am I correct that you've also done mural work?
Yes, in my old studio, I did a mural. It was really my first opportunity to do that, and my landlord said, "Just paint anything you want."
Love it.
And I was like, "You're an angel." And so it was really nice, that freedom, because I was able to do something for myself, and I did it last Valentine's Day.
Oh,
actually.
I love that. Yeah.
It was really nice.
Did you find, was that your first time working with a surface area that large?
Yes.
Yeah. What are the differences there in a larger piece versus a smaller piece?
I have so much respect for muralists. I really do, because it's so hard on your body.
Oh, yeah.
It's, like, I never would have guessed. I thought that, there's tricks, and yes, there are, to make it easier, but I would say, like, if you're doing a detailed mural, some of that it took me probably over a week of daily work, and my body was a mess afterwards, but it felt so worth it. So I will say, like, I learned a lot on how to do a mural, but also just how much work it is.
Yeah. Is it something you'd want to do again?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't do a ton of visual art, but it's always kind of confounded me how people can make it so big. I would lose all sense of scale. I mean, no, it has to be huge to be seen from further away as opposed to like, this tiny thing. But yeah, I imagine it would be quite difficult. A lot of stretching, a lot of ladders, a lot of crouching, and all of that. Where is your mural now?
It's still in the studio, but the house was purchased by somebody else, so I'm not sure what they've done with it.
I see, yeah. Okay, cool. So you had mentioned that you really started kind of nurturing an art practice about 7 years ago when you were 30. And a lot of people, I think maybe who want to start getting into that, don't really know how to take it to the next level. Next level being where other eyes are on it. And I know you have done this. You have made collections, you have a studio, you have things online, you have things exhibited. What advice would you give people about how to go about that?
I would say the best advice I could give any artist is just put yourself out there as much as you can.
Yeah.
Do all the things that you can, and you'll find what you like. I've found that there's certain things I don't like doing, but I had to actually do them to know.
Yeah.
And also when you're doing those things, you're meeting other people and making connections, and so that can get you out there too. But also, I really will mention Loca Art. They're local, well, actually they're international, but they are like a website where you can submit your art and they will partner you with a local business. Oh. And it's so nice because they take, I think it's 30% of your sale, but that's actually pretty low for the industry, and they do all the legwork. They find you a place to hang it, and they help you feel confident about doing it.
Yeah.
So they have gotten me a ton of my shows and supported me a lot, and I really couldn't thank them enough.
That's awesome. Loca Art is what it's
Yes.
called. Yeah, that's a great resource for anyone out there wanting to know what the next step might be, how you even get started, how you get connected. I think, like we were talking before, a lot of obstacles are mental for a lot of people. Do you have any advice there? It's very common for artists to just, you simultaneously want the world to know and hide under a rock. Do you have anything to speak to there?
That couldn't be more true. It's definitely like a constant battle.
Yeah.
But I would say, like, it's kind of it's a happy medium of like finding what feels comfortable and also pushing yourself.
Yeah, a balance there.
Yeah, and it's tricky, definitely, because I'm more of an introvert and I'd rather just hide in my house. And because I have a cleaning business, I'm really tired a lot of the time.
Yeah, talking about physically demanding work.
Right. So I don't want to go out and network and things like that.
Right.
But it's so important. So I try when I can to do those things. But yeah. I'm not sure. Did I answer the question?
Well, how to break down those mental barriers? I think a lot of it has to start with just a place of non-judgment, like we were talking about before. It's like there's no wrong way to do this. I didn't do it wrong. I'm not, the art police aren't going to come after me. It's true. It might not be everyone's cup of tea, and learning to recognize that is okay. That doesn't mean it's valueless. It doesn't mean it's worthless. It doesn't mean that I am worthless and I should just go die. There's you got to get to that place where you're able to sort of let that go. And I think I was just talking with a group of friends last night about there's a lot of capitalist mindset of like, well, how can I justify the time and the money it takes to create? How can I justify doing something that I might not get a return on investment? All of these ideas that we're ingrained with, that any sort of energy output has to have at least an equal
Totally.
And therefore we're like, well, art, well, that's just, I should do something productive and something, completely not thinking about how much art fuels us all.
Right.
Forward, and how important it is to daily life. I guess I kind of answered that question, or took that question away. Was there any more you'd like to add to that?
I would.
Any of that? Yeah.
Thank you for asking, because I'm kind of ADD, so I'll go on tangents. But I would say, like, I have had so many blocks. Like, they call it artist block, but it's really just life block.
Yeah.
And we all have it. But I would say that when you're putting yourself out there as an artist, you come across it a lot more. And the things I've found that make me the most scared are often the things that I need to run at and embrace. And breaking through that is tricky, but just saying, you know what, if I don't do this, I'll never have the experience of doing it. So I have to just do it. It's like riding a bike.
And I think often you'll find that once you do the scary thing, the next thing's not quite so scary. You realize, like, I did it and I survived, and courage begets courage until we can do it and not, have a panic attack.
Right, totally.
So to sum up, make art. Do it scared if you must, but do it.
I agree fully.
Has the Pacific Northwest influenced your art, and if so, how?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time on the beaches as a kid with my grandparents and my mom and just my whole family. Like, rock hunting was one of our favorite things to do. And just being in nature has always been a big part of my life. And so it definitely heavily influences me, because it kind of feels like my church. Like, if I need clarity or grounding, just go into nature and be around the beauty here. We're so lucky to have such a beautiful place to live.
And there's a sort of ethereal vibe to the Pacific Northwest. I've only lived here about 4.5 years, but it's very almost fantasy-esque. You're walking it, just the mossy trees and the big rocks and the stony beaches. It's a vibe. It's a great place. It really is, and very good for art, I imagine. So back to abstract art. Do you have, when you approach making an abstract piece, do you kind of have a bunch of materials on hand and then you just start playing and putting things down? Or do you have a sort of theme or color palette in mind before you begin? And I think a lot of people are confused about how to begin an abstract piece.
I tend to gravitate towards certain colors naturally. I'm not sure why. I don't really have favorite colors, but I just naturally gravitate towards more like neon or pastel, kind of like really bright, exciting colors.
Yeah.
But sometimes really just going to like an art supply store and
that's the best.
finding a paint that I really like, it just will inspire me, and that will start it off, like when I really lack inspiration, I'll just go to an art store and just nerd out.
Yes.
And then by the time I leave there, I'm ready. I'm just like, we have to do this.
Yes, it's art supplies are one of my drugs of choice. It's hard. It's like, I know I don't need any more, but they're so
Right.
pretty. And then if you get into another medium, like, well, I have to go buy all the supplies, gotta go buy acrylic inks,
Right.
and sponges, and more
Totally.
paper. And
Story of my life.
Yes, it's wonderful. What are some of the challenges you have encountered as you've gotten braver in your art practice and or just creating it or bringing it out more to the public eye? What are some things you've encountered that have been challenging?
I would say for me, personally, it's probably different than others, but the business side of art is hard for me. I mean, for everybody, I'm sure, but because I already have a business,
Yeah.
I don't really want to do any business
Right.
with art. I just want to
Yeah.
play, and
Yeah.
that's my therapy. So, and I don't share enough of my art. I don't really talk about it enough, and that's one challenge I have because I'm shy. And I feel like, oh, nobody cares, even though that's not true. And so my biggest struggle is with myself.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just getting through those hurdles and being like, I can do this. It's not that bad.
Yeah. 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 It's like we've said, sometimes the biggest obstacle to creation is ourselves. And
Totally.
That's a really hard thing to overcome sometimes. What about your greatest triumphs? What's something that you're the most proud of having done artistically?
Ooh, I would say this last year I got my art on a marijuana label, which was really cool.
Yeah.
It was kind of scary because I'm used to it being illegal and
right.
all that stuff, but at the same time it's not a big deal, and it felt really exciting, and that was a big deal for me. And also having my work here last winter was really exciting, and a big goal of mine to have a solo show somewhere that felt really official.
Yes.
But I would say most of my triumphs are silent. You know what I mean?
Back to that internal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Overcoming. That's really cool. We've talked about your current show that you have up. What else do you have in the works right now?
I'm kind of just exploring what's next. And since I lost my art studio in August because the owner sold the place, which was fine. She was amazing. I was really lucky to have her as part of my life. But I am kind of just looking for a space that I can do what I do, because I play with stuff that's really stinky, and it's kind of hard to find a space that I can create where I'm not bugging other people,
Right.
or I can just zone out. And so I'm kind of in limbo right now, but I'm doing a lot of digital art while I can,
Yeah.
because I can't really do a whole lot at home.
Yeah.
But anything that I can do, I'm gonna do it.
Yeah. Yeah. That creative compulsion
It
must
totally-
be answered.
It's very compulsive, for sure.
Do you have any thoughts about balancing a day job, one that's very physically demanding with cleaning and a business, and all of that takes a lot of brain space, and reserving time for art? I know a lot of people struggle with, well, how do I make time for art? How do I even do that with the demands of life?
Strangely enough, cleaning is actually really helpful.
Really?
Because I think really anything where you're moving your hands and you're not talking, you're processing things in a different way.
Yeah.
And so I find that when I clean for a few hours through the day and then I'm done with that, my brain is in a different state. It's almost like a flow state where I can let things out easier.
Yeah.
So if I can't clean, or if I'm not cleaning that day, I'll do gardening or tinker with my plants, or do stuff that gets me in my head but out of my head, if that makes sense. Where I'm in silence, and that helps me to get into that state where I can be free with it instead of really meticulous.
That makes a lot of sense, because I I'm a writer professionally, which is it's a mental task. And so by the end of the day, like you're mentally tired, and I don't have that same like mental focus for art in the same way. But if you have the ability, to garden or to clean or to use your body and your hands, and your brain can be a little bit more in a flowy state, then you might have some of that energy left over
Yeah,
for
that's
creation
the hard part.
at the end of the day.
I couldn't imagine if I was using my brain all day. Like, it would be hard, I think, unless my art just had no thought.
Yeah.
But sometimes it doesn't. But I guess I couldn't imagine, like, if I used my brain all day, how much harder that would be.
Yeah, to have the
reset.
mental energy. Because there is a difference. Like, you can have the physical energy and not the mental, and vice versa for creation. Have you ever hit a time of just no inspiration, just not creating at all?
Totally.
And
yes.
how do you come out of that? Do you just let it ride or try to coax it?
I find that sometimes when that happens, it's necessary, and you just need to take a break and be slow.
Give it time.
Yeah. I used to really fight it, and it would make me depressed.
Yeah.
And it still makes me depressed. But I would say that it's like, I've learned to just say, okay, this is what I need. And like, maybe if I try and force myself to make something when I'm not where I need to be, then it's not going to be good anyway.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be happy. And then I'll be more unhappy
Right.
about not creating. So, but I've gone through a period of that this year, actually, since October, just all the stuff going on in the world. Like, I just got overwhelmed and I just couldn't make anything. And I just felt like, I don't know what to do. But it comes back, and it's just that you can't. I think the key is you can't beat yourself up over it, and you have to be like, okay, it's fine.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Again, we have this kind of endless productivity mindset, but things naturally go in seasons. They're supposed to go in seasons. Winter, for instance, is a time of hibernation and relaxation, and then you plant your little seeds, and then in the spring they come up, and then you care for them and harvest them. But it's meant to be cyclical, so that it's okay if things go a little quiet for a time. And then we need to remind ourselves of that, and that's a good reminder of, like, if you're not, producing full speed, that's all right. Be patient with yourself and the natural rhythms of you as an artist.
Right. It can be hard, though, with today.
Definitely.
And with the algorithm, too. Like, we're kind of taught that if we don't constantly churn stuff out, nobody will care.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's hard.
Yeah, and I was speaking to a jeweler the other day who sells her jewelry. And so she was talking about, like, if you sell something at Christmas time, then you're just mad producing all through, and then you're like burn out in January and you don't want to like make another thing. Like, that's
Totally
can be an unfortunate part of selling your art as well, is like once it's commodified, it's kind of like, well, there are peak seasons and it's peak selling, and the market doesn't care that you're meant to be hibernating in winter.
Right.
It's like sell.
That's the craziest part to me. Every year when the season comes around, I'm like, I hate to admit this, but I kind of shut down. And I don't know if it's like my punk side or what, but I'm like, I don't want to do this. I'm not doing this.
Yeah. It makes sense. Have you lived in South King County for? You said you're from White Center.
Yes.
Correct.
My
So
whole life.
you've been down here, and I'm sure there have been many ebbs and flows in the art scene and the art space in that time. But is there something you would like to see? Would you like to see expand in any particular way, or things you'd like to see included in the art scene in South King County?
I would love it if there was more or less gatekeeping and more opportunities for artists who don't really have education or who aren't really part of the art world. I also would love to see, like, there's so many vacant buildings, and it would be so cool if those spaces could be creative spaces or spaces that could be rented to artists.
Yeah.
Because a lot of us don't have a ton of money. And I see these places, like there's one place in Arbor Heights where I live that I pass by all the time. It's a beautiful building that's been empty for like 4 years.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, I could be in there making art.
Right.
And I mean, not that it should be mine or anything, but I think it would be so cool because there's so many artists, unfortunately, that like some of the most talented artists nobody even knows about or has
Right.
any resources.
Right.
And I would love to see those people get what they need to be able to put themselves out in the world.
Yeah, I love that. I was talking to Andrew McMasters on the show, who's part of the Burien Creative Arts District. And he was mentioning something I had never thought about, which is that affordable housing is such a huge part of a thriving art scene, because when artists are securely housed,
Right.
they can create art. And then it creates this feedback loop for the community and for the economy. But you never hear about like support the arts, create affordable housing,
Totally.
Or just like you're saying, figuring out some kind of pipeline without so much red tape of like, hey, these buildings in limbo, how can we make them accessible to artists affordably or freely to create something here for the community without a bunch of political red tape and having it lost somewhere.
Totally.
So, I love that. Well, do you have a personal mantra or motivational quote that you live by? I like to end interviews on that question.
I would say my favorite quote is by Sylvia Plath, and it's live life day by day, color by color, never, or I might get this wrong, forget who has a better body or mind, but embrace yours as much as you can. It's probably not exact words, but it's pretty much what she said, and it was in her unabridged diaries. I really loved her. She was a sad loss to the poetry world, but such a really deep person.
Yeah, and a deep thinker. And I love that because at the end of the day, like, you've got what you've got. And you spend all of your time wishing it were something else, then you don't spend your time showing the world you and investing in you.
Right.
So that's great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. This
Thank
has been
you.
fun.
Yes, it's been wonderful. Thank you for joining us today for the BTown Breakdown. You can join us next week on Friday at 6 p.m. at 106.5 KQWZ LPF.
Tune in for a new show every Friday at 106.5 KQWZ LPFM, South King County.